All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Industrial Insights Podcast. I have Mike Myers with me today from Lully, and I missed you at ProMAT. I think you had your own booth over there.
Did, yeah. We were in the startup pavilion right there on the corner. So we got to catch everyone as they were heading to lunch and on their way back, as well coming out of one of the main halls there. So it was a good show. There was a lot happening.
Yeah. Packed. It was huge. Yeah, I got my steps in and then some. I could almost like run from one to the other and log like half a marathon, maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you didn't get 30,000 steps a day, you probably shorted yourself.
So, Lolly, best I can understand is how do we take BPLs, WMS systems, and then improve upon them, knowing that there's plenty of inefficiency, like yet to overcome. Can you help us get a quick intro on what Lolly does? And then I love that you've come from ODW, Abercrombie, Big Lots, and then I saw Ryder. Yeah, I know some of the folks at Ryder and at ODW. So when I saw some of the places you have worked in the past, I was excited that of the experience that you probably got along the way.
Yeah. So I started in the warehouse, so to speak. So started as a continuous improvement, process improvement engineer embedded within operations. And that's really where I got exposure to the problem set that we're solving. So it was a pain point that we dealt with operationally, regardless if it was in a retailer or if it was in a 3PL fulfilling for a brand. The problem set was effectively the same. And we set out to see if we could solve it in a pseudo agnostic way. So when you think about an operation, everyone cares about shipping things on time in full as a primary concern. And then secondary concern is how do you do it efficiently? How do you do it in a cost effective way? And what we found is that the WMSs do as good of a job as possible of giving you optimized plans, labor plans, execution plans, but there's a big gap in the quality of the plan that they're giving you. And that manifests as additional walking, additional stops, additional trips required. And that's what we're solving is how do you best utilize the equipment? How do you best utilize the labor to get the most volume out with the things that you already have? It's not too different from there's been a surge in the last 10 years of pick assist AMRs, and it's not too different from what they're doing, right? They are solving the problem with a specific end effector known as a robot, and we're just doing it without the robot. How do you solve the problem with the things you already have, right?
It's a lot cheaper than robots, right? And a lot less like learning experiences, I'm sure, of what could go wrong and what's not as advertised.
Less intrusive. Yeah, less intrusive. So one of the goals is always to just make your current process better. So we may think it's not the right process, but if I insert a hurdle of you having to change your on the floor process to get better, I've now made it harder to get better. And I don't care if that's Lully, if that's a WMS change, if that's a robot, I've now inserted a hurdle. So we're trying to intentionally not do that. Whatever you're doing today, however you're picking, we just want to make that better. And then over time, we'll talk to you about how you can pull on other levers to get even more efficiency. But step one is just making you better today.
Yeah, music to people's ears, right?
Yeah.
How can you not want that?
Yeah. Yeah. We think so.
What do you think is preventing WMS systems from doing better? Right? Like if they're optimizing for the wrong things, or it's like they don't have Mike on the inside over there. They just have more people that are like general subject matter experts.
I don't
What
know
would you
that
guess?
Mike is the full complete secret sauce. Um, the reality is it's a really big, complex problem. Math space of the problem is huge, and sorting through it is really complex. So if you go way, way back, UMs had some functionality to start creating batches and releasing them to the floor. And then some smart operations person said, hey, if we put a pick sequence on these locations, we can control the way that people move through the building. And that produced a good general heuristic to minimize travel. It's not perfect, but it's a good general heuristic. And then another smart operations person said, I should group all my singles together because that will create pick density. If I have a fast running SKU and I just batch all my singles, by default, I will go pick that one, SKU that blew up all on one trip. And that's going to make me more efficient. And then I'm going to batch my two lines together because that cubes my vehicle out really nicely, right? So they've developed all these heuristics. And over time, those heuristics became selectable rules within the warehouse management system. They produce success, they produce value. So the WMs replicated them as code. And that is effectively the optimization that happens today. But taking that next step to fully explore, I have all of these orders. I have 3,000 orders. I'm taking 15 per trip. I made a post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago that the number of combinations you can generate of that 3,000 orders and 15 orders per trip is more than there are grains of sand on the planet, right? There's more combinations than grains of sand on the planet. So when you think about dealing with a problem space that big, it's complex. Um, and so that's not to say that a WMS can't do it. It's just to say that they haven't figured out how to break that problem down today. And I'm sure that over time, inevitably, some will.
Yeah. There's plenty of room for people to attack this problem.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, like you had a example that was a company that you worked with recently. I think examples always like speak so much to helping people understand. I don't know if you
Yeah.
have one or two of your last projects in mind that is a good example of like a part of the process and the challenge and like how it works to discover it and like start to work through it, knowing that it's not a straight line and maybe it's a little bumpy along the way.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've got two that jump out. Waco Shoes is a good example where over time, their drop shipping volume has exploded. So they're self-fulfilling their own demand. Drop ship volume has exploded and their SKU base has grown quite a bit. So the historical approach of trying to grab like orders in a very simplistic way started showing cracks, we'll say. And over time, as that SKU base grew, the spread of the inventory grew, and the performance in the operation continued to decrease. It continued to drop, and it required more and more labor to fulfill. And by happenstance, their CFO found me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, would you take a look at it?"
Searching for the answers. I got
He
to do
was,
something here. I don't
I've
know
got it.
anybody that knows anything about this.
Right. So, and they will tell you that they are not necessarily experts in warehouse execution. They are experts in shoes and making really good shoes and making customer experience good, right?
Yeah.
So he reached out and it was a tough environment, frankly. It's a very, they laugh, but I'd say the warehouse is very organic. It's just kind of grown and changed and morphed over time. It's not what you would consider an ideal layout. So from our standpoint, it was a tedious mapping exercise, right? Very, because we have to generate all the XYZs and understand the layout and the rules of the operation. And it was a tough one on our side just to set up the map, get things built. But I'll use his verbiage. So they had a large sale with a big retailer, resulting in a bunch of dropship volume, and what had historically taken them 4 or 5 days to complete, they completed it in 2 days. So that it's a pretty good proof in the pudding, so to speak, of there is opportunity to squeeze here. It's just you got to find it, and then you got to find the right people to assist. Similarly, with FST, they have an e-commerce customer, and FST is a 3PL based in Columbus, Ohio. They're traditionally focused on the food, beverage space, and this e-commerce customer was pumping out pretty meaningful volume. They don't have a massive SKU base, but what they do have is a high line count. So as your order line count goes up, the the complexity operationally goes up, right? Getting the replens done, being able to release, getting all the right things on a trip together to minimize the stops, minimize the distance, it gets harder and harder. They had looked at a couple of, we'll say, physical technology based solutions. And I think the thing that ultimately stopped them was value proposition and complexity, depending on which you were looking at. And we formed a relationship. It took a couple weeks to get the deployment stood up and live. But when it was all said and done, the favorite tagline that they used recently was, during peak season, they brought in 25 less temporary laborers. So even though throughout the year, right, there's continual savings and there's value being generated, simplifying peak season to that degree is a huge win operationally.
Yeah. Half the time to get through massive orders and then 25% less labor during peak potential. Yeah. Using what you already have better.
Yes, just using
Yeah.
what you have. Using the same carts or order pickers or pallet jacks. Yeah, just using it more effectively.
You must have a lot of happy campers. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
We have done some work for people selling baseball cards, of all things, for some of the major musical instrument companies that are e-commerce companies that are name brands, and a whole host of different uses. Even one that is a 3PL for a lot of high-end furniture stores. And so
Mm,
you could imagine, I mean, you know better than I, the difference between baseball cards versus like guitars and drums versus couches, and
sure.
like how
Yeah.
that changes like your racking, your storage, your process, your people, even like your location. So it's always great to see like what are they doing, where are they at, and they're scaling out of the four walls that they have. For me, I'm always cognizant of how long is left on their lease before they're going to have to hit an inflection point. So I always think of operations problems just being a real estate guy in terms of like you usually have like 5, 7, or 10-year windows before these inflection points, and a lot of capex
Yep.
decisions and budgets revolve around these inflection points. So anytime someone is talking about a warehouse automation system or some kind of work, it's always to me mentally is like, well, how long do we have that we know we have
This building.
solid or firm commitment, yeah, at a certain price, and like our confidence that like this will be okay for that period of time. And then, okay, what if so that delay until it's up and then we do it again? Do we negotiate early and get a new firm commitment? Do we have to buy now instead of lease because we're going to dump 10 million bucks into just the automation, not even like the people or the building or construction or office or whatever? And so that's the lens I always bring to it. That is always interesting to see like folks like you sometimes can be consulting with clients, and then it's like, well, we only
Hmm.
got 18 months left on this contract. So let's have Mike and Justin like a combo their efforts so that we're thinking holistically about like this decision that we're going to make, and like when to make it and how it affects like what today's solution is versus like the next 10 years capital
Yeah.
decision is.
Yeah. I mean, this was a constraint we ran into with in the 3PL world all the time. There can be a piece of technology that would be phenomenal for a specific operation, right? And thinking about an ASRS or goods to person or whatever it may be. But if it doesn't align with the 3PL's customer agreement, or if it doesn't align with the building agreement, it may be a non-starter. It can be really hard to get all the pieces to line up right, which is, I think, why typically you see those automation projects happen, to your point, at building inception, right? So I'm going to stand up a new building, or I'm just starting working with this client. That's when you see the automation going in. But that's, 5 or 10% of their client base, not the 90 to 95 that are already existing in their current facilities.
Yeah, it's funny seeing people do like a network supply design and optimization studies, and they're planning for what they're going to do. Do I 3PL? Do I not? Do I need to be in the west, the east, just the middle? Or am I doing a one, two, or three building network or more? And how continuous, like you have continuous improvement perhaps as your first position. You think of
Mhm,
like everything is moving towards more continuous as we
mhm.
have more like a software and more like ability to model supply chains. Is this do you stay on with people continuously? You revisit things quarterly, or what's like the cadence once you've helped someone like optimize today or for this quarter, then what's that look like over time?
Yeah. So typically, when we're onboarding and going through that discovery, we will identify things that we want to happen in the future just through the data, just through the simulations. But we won't expose it just yet because, again, we're just trying to solve the current day. But then quickly after deployment, we'll work really tightly with that operation and start actually making recommendations to make tweaks, to make adjustments, assuming we didn't learn anything new in the deployment process. And then, we let them, to a degree, be the driver. So we're trying to give them data insights about item relationships and velocities and those types of things. But that's all surface level. When they see changes occurring, though, we're letting them be the driver unless an anomaly really sticks out. If we start seeing, hey, we're always going to this back corner of the building, you should address that. We may call it out proactively, but otherwise we're letting them be the driver until we have an insight that's worth pointing out to them to make a change.
Yeah. And then I gotta imagine people are like every quarter, every year, like, "Hey, Mike, can you come back?" And
Can you look at it? Yeah.
we
Well,
got a new product, we got a new customer, we got a new building, we got a new equipment, we got a new something.
yeah. Yeah, and new equipment is one of those things, or new racking. We use that as an example, right? People are always throwing up, taking down racking. And that's one of those things where locations are going to change, pathways are going to change. You can either facilitate that change through us, you can let us know, we can go make the adjustments on our side, but there's also the tooling to self-serve. So if you want to go into the map and delete 5 bays of racking, go ahead. Like, go ahead and do it. Map will recompile so that you can really self-serve in that way. Equipment, you got to let us know though, right? If you got a brand new order picker that reaches 400 inches instead of 366, well, now you're kind of in a new world, but we need to make some changes on our side to accommodate.
Yeah. And there's always new equipment coming.
Always.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shuffling in and out. Yep.
What are some of the challenges you face with people on site? Like, I gotta imagine people are used to doing things a certain way, or maybe can't articulate part of what the pain point is exactly.
Yeah, so it give you two different perspectives on it. So a lot of times the folks on the floor actually doing the work don't necessarily have to know that Lully's in place because the workflow is the same. So they may notice I'm traveling less or I'm getting more units per location, but they
Feeling more
may
jazzed, dude. I'm not so drained at the end of the day. Yeah.
right? Yeah, but they don't necessarily have the why behind it. But there are times where we'll deploy, so we support what we think of as static or dynamic pathing. So this is the sequence that you move through a building. And we talked earlier, the WM already has a sequence on the location. They kind of already do that. And if you want to honor that sequence, we're happy to do it. But if you go to dynamic, now we have more freedom. We can make more adjustments to how you move through the building. But that can sometimes feel not intuitive to an operator. Why did I hop in this aisle and get one unit, come around, grab another unit, and then end around a second aisle, right?
Are you
It won't
sure this is better?
right. So we'll get those questions. And a lot of times it's about validating first. Okay, did we make an error? But if we didn't make an error, then okay, let's show you the math. Let's show you here's what would have happened if we had routed you the other way versus here's what actually happened. And even still, sometimes there will be good feedback. Like we had one recently where we thought an aisle was wide enough for an order picker to pretty easily make the swap in flip directions. And that turned out to not be the case. So we needed to make an adjustment. So we value the feedback, right? Because we don't want people doing things that are A, dangerous, but B, feel way out of left field from intuitive or way that they want to be operating.
It doesn't work that way. Yeah, we
Right?
can't do
Yeah.
that. That doesn't
Right.
fit. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love it. That's awesome. Are you noticing with 3PLs in general, like what percentage of the people you help would you say are 3PLs versus like people that are insourcing?
Roughly 60% are 3PLs.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're talking kind of the middle market per se. Are there any commonalities? I'm sure you see a ton of like what they're going through these days, and these days it could be like I
Yeah.
have noticed like this last 2 weeks versus like this last year. Whatever, however you want to interpret these days as like trends or commonalities you're seeing of like the pain points as 3PLs are trying to adjust and like stay current and invest in their operations.
Yeah, I do think that the last couple of months, we'll say, have been a bit of an outlier in terms of normal engagement. The concerns have shifted. The pain point of cost still exists. It's still there and it's still paramount, but uncertainty has crept up to a degree that it wasn't there, 2 months ago. I do think that in the 3PL world, it's a little different from a deployment standpoint because they tend to have, especially in a multi-client facility, they tend to have rules on rules on rules that don't exist in a brand. So what could look like a one building deployment for, a site in a 3PL could end up being for us 5, 6, 20 mini deployments because there's all these little nuanced rules
We
for
can
each
only do
client.
it this way for this client. Yeah.
Um, Whereas in the brand, you kind of capture that all up front, right? They know them all. They can articulate it. It's part of their operating system. Whereas with the 3PL, you typically start with one pain point, and then you're expanding and growing over time. So you have all these nuances that you need to capture and account for.
Yeah. So hopefully that's not 5 times the work for half the pay or same amount of pay or whatever.
I mean, that's the fortunate thing is that it's not fun, right? Because you're going through the discovery again, you're inserting delays. But the fortunate thing for us is that it's really as much a framework as it is optimization. So if we can get people to sit down and talk through what those rules are, explain them, relatively concisely, then turning that into configuration on our side isn't terrible. Once you kind of have the map stood up, everything else is pretty easy.
Yeah. What are challenges setting up the map? I gotta imagine that there's plenty there.
Yeah, man, if I could just get everyone to name locations the same way, that would be great. Um,
The dark corner over there, and that place with the cobwebs we don't like to go.
we don't like to talk about it. So it's, you know, because we're generating the XYZ and bounds of all of these locations, we need pretty detailed information. And we can infer and intuit a lot of it, but that is easiest when the location nomenclature follows some type of pattern. When that pattern is sporadic, that becomes difficult. That's when we need just lots of time, or we need you to get out on the floor with a camera to show us what you're talking about. Because we do the mapping exercise remotely, so we're not primarily coming on site to do it. So normally, good layout, good nomenclature. It's not a painful process. It's a couple of hours of work. When you get into the really organic, it can be multiple days of work to stand up a map and become painful because it's hard to validate. You need somebody on the customer side who knows the operation, knows the layout well to help you really step through it.
Why not go there in person? Just like it's impractical, or is that not actually necessary? Even though like
Y-
all processes can be fraught with challenges or like things you need to
Yeah,
overcome.
we could absolutely go do them in person. Our aim is not to, right? So we don't charge for a deployment up front.
Yes.
So a big part is us trying to make sure that we're keeping cost to deploy on our side reasonable.
You could be flying all over the place.
I
Yeah.
could be. The airline miles just aren't worth what they used to be, though. You know.
True
Uh,
that.
so because we want to keep it affordable, we try to do it via CAD or Excel file. But there are times where we've had Waco's a good example. We had somebody from their team actually walk us around via a virtual call to help us get a sense of where things actually were relative to this wall or the bathroom or whatever it may be, because there just wasn't enough detail and the naming convention wasn't done in such a way that you couldn't intuit it, you couldn't infer it. You kind of needed eyes on the process.
Yeah. Yeah, I could only imagine. Yeah, there's so many different people on the maturity curve or on the scale curve to get from like the one company, maybe single building
Yeah.
operator to like the multi-market, even multi-tenant, and like highly sophisticated or like highly processed.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, even when you get up to the really big orgs, the naming nomenclature can vary wildly. The layout can vary wildly. Really just depends on what type of growth they've gone through and what time period. I'm sure this is something you see from like a warehouse standpoint. You could envision this operation for today's volume, today's throughput, and suddenly it changes. Something in the market drives an adjustment, and you're now storing 30% more. Well, that reflects in layout changes and expedited deployments, which can just mean weird things happen operationally.
Yeah, we have plenty of clients like that for sure. Just like a different growth happens where it happens. Yeah, and you got to just adjust for it.
Exactly.
What could go wrong in all of this? Have you ever found people that like don't have any improvement and they're like, and you're like, wow, you guys are running a tight ship over there. I give you two thumbs up, and I appreciate you in our conversation.
We have so I've we've never deployed and not found improvement, but we have backed out of an engagement because we didn't think it was the right customer. So if you're shipping 3 SKUs and they never ship together, I'm not going to provide a lot of value to you, right? You can develop very simple rules to optimize that really effectively. You maybe need material equipment changes, but Lully isn't the right answer for that type of environment. So it may turn into just pointers on operations instead of us providing software. But by and large, the target market of e-commerce, especially multi-line orders, we're pretty confident that we can go in and make a meaningful improvement.
Yeah, that's like counting continents on the globe is different than counting grains of sand.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, they should be able to get that handled.
yes.
Um,
That's a good
tell
analogy.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about what you gleaned and took away from your ProMAT experience, right? Like you seem like you spend plenty of time engaging with people in the industry and like seeing how people are thinking about things and what they're deploying and like what they're experiencing out there. And like that was a sea of everybody in the industry. Where for me as a real estate broker, I'm like one of five out of the
Yeah.
10,000 people there. And most people are like, oh my gosh, we're talking real estate? No, we're talking automation. And so I felt like that was your people. Yeah. So for me, I took away a lot because there's a lot that like doesn't meet the eye of most real estate guys, even if I'm 20 years in and I've worked with a lot of big companies. So I'm curious what your takeaways were or what you like gathered from that experience.
So from a vendor standpoint, location, location, location. The location of your booth matters a lot.
Yes.
Uh, Getting your assignment early is worthwhile. How about that? From a general market standpoint, I think the biggest thing that jumped out at me is that integrators aren't going anywhere. So we have, especially in the US, there's a large population of integrators who are bringing technologies forward into operations. And I think the market and myself as well believe that over time that space would shrink. It would get compressed, especially as more natural partnerships formed across technology providers. But I after the show, I just don't believe that to be true. I think that the operations still want the integrators who have the expert knowledge of A, the operations, B, the relationships, but then C, all of these diverse technologies because they've seen them, they've talked to people, they're like an encyclopedia of information for warehouse technology. So I think integrators are here to stay. That's my big takeaway.
That's interesting because I guess on the vein of it, like them shrinking or that like a segment shrinking, you would think like that would be like an in-house capability of like a lot of vendors where like it doesn't necessarily have to be like its own independent person.
Right, right. And I think to a degree we've seen that. There are organizations out there that have their own in-house teams, but I think it's kind of like the middle market 3PL space. Like they are the bulk of the market. and they don't have that capability internally. So turning to somebody who's in the know, who's acting as an expert, I feel like is going to keep making sense for quite some time.
Integrators are my jam, Mike. Those are the people that I found like collaborating with like the easiest because I am that for businesses and the buildings. So like, we're like a different capability, but similar space in the market where you're in the middle and you got to know how all the players work and you got to know people's operations and you got to
Uh-huh.
marry the two as best you can.
Hmm.
You would think the middleman always get squeezed and like it digitize the middleman and he's gone and like we all saved the money and whatever. And then you realize like there's some of that, like, and it's not like that idea like isn't without merit, but just like there is still value and like enough value and there's enough change and there's enough new entrants into the market that like, yeah, there's still that need persists, no doubt.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't foresee it going anywhere, especially not with the change rate that we're going through, right? Both from a digital technology standpoint, physical technology standpoint, it's harder than ever to keep up with what's good, what's bad, what's new, what's old. And that's the role that the integrators are playing is just, hey, I know your operation. Here's what I've seen in the market. Here's a informed recommendation on how you approach this problem.
I love that people are finding you, Mike. They got the problem. Have you found that's how most of your stuff happens, or is you just like you're reaching out, or you guys got a sales team, or it's yeah, just
No,
you
no.
busting your hump and
Yeah. So
yeah,
there's no formal sales team. We're doing no active marketing or promotion in that way. And
yes,
today, almost all of our opportunities are coming either via word of mouth or somebody spotting something on LinkedIn and reaching out. So
yeah.
about
How
as
cool is
organic.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, word of mouth isn't going to scale forever, but it's been pretty daggone good to us so far.
I love sometimes you have to do the things that don't scale, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes that's where there is opportunity. Have you met the Prologis guys? I feel like they're doing anything and everything to help people's operations inside the box and that like they would benefit by knowing you. Happy to introduce you to a couple of people if that's helpful. I know they're looking for this type of like relationships because they have so many large customers that are
Yeah.
3PLs and always looking for stuff. I'd be curious if you haven't linked up with them a little bit.
No, I haven't actually. I haven't chatted with the Prologis group at all.
Yeah. Let's help make some new friends, Mike. Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah.
And then what are some things you're excited about? What do you see coming? Like we got the future coming up this year, next year. Anything that's on the horizon? I know we're trying to electrify everything all over the place and that come and like turn everything into robots. And so that is interesting. It was great to see all the solutions that weren't like too groundbreaking from stuff perhaps like you're used to seeing. Yeah, is there anything that stands out to you as like you're looking out for, or you're the renegade because we're working with what we have more so than integrating
Yeah.
robots?
Yeah, so I'm on the other end of the spectrum here, and I love all the new technologies and the new capabilities, but for me, there's going to be more old buildings than new buildings, right? And there's
Yeah.
going to be more existing operations than new operations.
Without a doubt.
And there's a lot of folks that can get better without spending tons of money. So
Yes.
selfishly, I'm in love with the idea that Lolly is bringing to the table. If you force me to give you an answer on the thing I was really pumped about from a new technology standpoint, I did really like the new Exotech
Yeah.
SkyPod system.
Yep.
I thought that was really clever. I'm not.
I would almost think goods are going to be slamming into the side of the bin because it was like, I was
It's
surprised. It was like
flying.
faster than your eye moves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I still don't know how it shakes out with AutoStore. Like, I think that's a really fun exercise to go through of, all right, if I had these two options in my hand, what I would pick. I still think it's very dependent on the operation and the inventory and the throughput needs and all that fun stuff. But I did think the new SkyPod was pretty great. And then you'll laugh. There was a really low tech banding solution at the show that I got excited about. all it is putting a band around a box, right? It's banding two boxes together or putting a band around a box, but they had solved a safety problem related to it. And I thought it was phenomenal. If I can find
Rubber
the
bands, Mike. We figured it out. We made them bigger.
right. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just resonated with me. It's like, all right, that's such a simple solution to solve a real problem.
Why
Bring it
aren't we
to
already
fruition.
doing this? I'm glad
Why aren't
someone
we
figured
doing
it
it?
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then tell me, where'd the name come from? I have to ask. Lully.
Yeah. Yeah, so there was the gentleman credited with being the first composer. His name was John Baptiste Lully. So we took his abbreviated namesake, and that's really the way that we think about Lully over the long run is intralogistics orchestration. So how do you orchestrate within the four walls? But that is a big, massive, complex problem, and it's one that most operations don't actually need solved yet. But that is our chip on the table for automation will keep growing, more operations will become automated. In the meantime, we're thinking about it as how do you solve the problems within the four walls of the island, we'll say, of this fulfillment method, this order type, whatever it may be. How do you solve them individually? And then we'll roll them up into an orchestration over time.
And then I've had to get a tattoo, so I always remember to ask people about AI. Man, going to conferences, AI is like on you like a cheap suit. Like you can't
Yeah.
escape it. It's
Can't get rid
everywhere.
of it.
Everything's got it. It's where's that fit into the mix here? It's not in it at all. It's in it quite a bit. Or how's that intersect your world?
Yeah. So I think it depends on how you define AI. So we think of it as entirely AI, but we don't really talk about it that way.
Yeah.
And maybe we should. I'm not sure. But
That's why I was like, Mike, spill the AI beans. You haven't said the
so
buzzword once.
no, so maybe this is the wrong marketing stance, and that's okay. But I think that operators don't care if it's AI or if it's anything else. I think by and large, they're indifferent to how you get to the outcome or the answer.
Yes.
And we've elected to not highlight that as what we do or who we are.
Yeah.
But in its purest sense, sure, it is about as AI could be. It is not a LLM, if that makes sense. But
Yeah.
we don't proactively talk about it a ton. Maybe we should. Maybe I should use the buzzword more.
Yeah. Hey, using what you already have better. You can't beat that. Yeah, I think you're on the right path.
I just need to add the with AI on, right?
Yes. Yes. Small, italic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I consider this just an introduction, Mike. I'm sure we could talk about a billion things, and we covered kind of just like a little here and a little there. Didn't like it get too crazy in depth, but I figure it's a great place to start of just people understanding like what it is you do and how you help people. And I'm interested to learn more, so if we could explore it or unpack it better another time, happy to do that. And yeah, I really appreciate you spending time with me today, and I'm sure there will be plenty of people that like got value out of this that can reach out and they have their own problems that they perhaps might need some help on.
For sure. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for having me on, and it was good to chat with you. Yeah, we didn't get too deep, but if anyone has questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to provide any insight you need.
Cool. Awesome. Have a great one, Mike. We'll catch you later.
Thank you. You too.
Yep. Bye bye.
Bye bye.